Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. This is Marion, City Council. Welcome. Thank you. This is Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. We have a little change in the order on the agenda. One of our first presenter is running late, so we're going to start with the second one, which is the annual presentation from the City of Cedar Rapids Water Pollution Control Facility. Mike, introduce.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I have Roy Hensman, the Utility Director for the City of Cedar Rapids. Mary.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mike. As Mike said, Roy Hessman, Utilities Director with the City of Cedar Rapids. And I think this is the fourth annual presentation we've now come and done before the council. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we've been doing at the wastewater plant and some other work that we've been working on the last several years to get to the point we are today. So I'll bring that up here shortly. So just a very brief history. I know you've got at least one new council member and few folks may not remember some of the history. The wastewater plant down off of Highway 13 and 30 has now been there almost 50 years. It's the new plant. So we started the operations there in 1980, and it serves all of Cedar Rapids, Marion, Hiawatha, Robbins, Palo, and a little bit of Lynn County. So it's a rather unique facility that's population base of about 195,000 people. But with the industrial loadings that we have from the industry here in the community, it's the equivalent of treating a population base of about 1.9 million people. So what we've been working on is contract 2. We first introduced this a few years ago as we started this project. We actually, and I'll get into the timeline, but we actually started on this. What you see in blue on the right side of the screen is the primary area that we're working on. But this contract that came in at $348 million, we've been able to reduce that down to about $320 million through value engineering. But it really impacts the entire plant. It really has roots within the entire facility. But what you see in blue is what we're primarily doing right now. And then the green is flood control levee and flood wall that extends out to the west there, so that we are now protected and have been since 2014, 3 foot above the 08 flood. So hopefully we never see another situation like that again, but the plant is fully protected at that point. The timeline, we literally started working on this project, this contract 2, about 2014. The flood wall was finished in 2013. It was time to start focusing and planning for what our next steps were. So it took us about 10 years to lay out the plans and designs. We bid the project in the summer of 2024 and then broke ground November 1st of 2024. The project is scheduled for 4 years. And at this point, we are still on schedule for that completion date. Just a few renderings as we go through some slides. This is the anticipated appearance of the digesters, the 2 digesters there, and then the solids handling building for those digesters in front. And then this is the solids handling side of the facility. So this is rather new technology, AGS system. So the solids will, we're always trying to remove the solids from the water and get the water out. The more water we can get, the easier it is to dispose of the solids. And then we incinerate those solids. So this is a newer technology that we incorporated into this design. It's much more efficient, much smaller footprint, and able to handle a lot of solids in that small footprint. And then we also then take the solids and put those into the digester, and we're going to be able to generate and sell renewable natural gas off of those digesters. And this is what it really looks like today. So the lower portion of the plant or lower portion of the screen there is the main construction area. A lot of laydown area, contractor area, and then just you can see some of the size, the scope of the actual construction going on. And then just some random slides from the actual construction that's been going on here for the last year, a little over a year, almost a year and a half now. Here's a lot of concrete. I meant to get the amount of concrete that's been poured, but there's been multiple hundreds of yards of concrete pours that have gone on throughout this. A lot of that concrete is multiple feet thick, so it's quite the task going forward. Some more random pictures. This is some of the walls going up of those AGS building structures. Laydown area and contractor area. And I think with that, that's kind of where we're at with the construction part of it. The other part that we've been working on for the last 3.5 years actually is revising and redoing our 28E agreement for wastewater services. The current agreement that we've been working on was signed in June of 2019. It actually looked back at the prior year's flow. It was really actually weather dependent. Wet years would swing results one way. A dry year would swing the costs a different way. It was, I would just say, extremely confusing at best. It did provide for a population base of up to 48,000 for Marion. So for the last 3.5 years, thanks to Kim and Mike and Ryan and others, along with Hiawatha, their city manager and city engineer, been working alongside of all of us. We've been working out a new 2080 agreement. So the nice things about it and some of the highlights, Marion and Hiawatha will have essentially identical agreements. The format will be the same. It'll just be some of the numbers and names changed. Otherwise, it'll be same duration, same format, same everything else. It will be much more predictable for being able to budget your costs over the next several years. I always project what those rate increases are going to look like. With the old plan, there was no way to really figure out until the end of the year what those rates were going to look like. So this way we can look at it and be able to plan those rate increases in that budgeting for the budgeting purposes. We'll be much more transparent between everyone, sharing meter information and then working through discrepancies. We've had some issues over the years with meters. Meters are finicky things, and it's always hard to figure out which one's right. So this way we can compare notes and make sure that we're getting the right reads. Actually incentivizes for flow reduction. So if a community is working on their infiltration and inflow, it'll help reduce those flows going through there, and it'll actually help reduce your overall costs. And then just like we've been doing, it'll include those annual reviews, both at a staff level, to make sure that everything is up to speed, everybody's in the know, but then also here at the council level. Just to kind of explain best I can in this few minutes, I really look at this agreement much like we look at our industrial users. If you drew a box around Marion, the flow for Marion's usually in the 3.5 million gallons a day range. So that gets us above the threshold of 1.5 million that we consider a group 3 industry. So what we're really doing is taking and looking at Marion and Hiawatha as one of our industries. And since there are so many flows in from Cedar Rapids to Marion, from Marion back into Cedar Rapids and vice versa, it's hard to do the daily samples like we do with industry. So we're going to monitor and measure the flows on a daily basis and invoice according to the flows. But then based on those flows, we'll take what's called 10 state standards. That's a standard that we in the industry use to figure out what the other parameters are in that wastewater loading. So we'll use that information to then calculate the bill. And it also allows a population increase up to 61,000 by 2042. Why 2042, might you ask? Well, again, it goes back to that fact, we've been working on this for years. One of the first questions we asked is, what do you anticipate the population of Marion and Hiawatha to be 20 years out? So 20 years would have been 2042. So that just tells you how long we've been working on this. And again, making it a 20-year, I guess 18-year at this point, it would be effective through 2042. So next steps, we're currently in the final legal review. Cedar Rapids attorneys, Hiawatha's attorneys have reviewed it. Marion's attorney is in the process of reviewing it. They've all seen it before, so we don't expect any surprises, but a lot of the final touch-ups are what I call legalese. The final agreement, Mike and Kim said, will come before Marion Council on April 9th. And then we need to do a public hearing and an ordinance change. We don't currently have a group 6, which is what we're going to classify our adjoining communities as a group 6. So we have to do that ordinance change and then final reading of that ordinance change and the agreement. We anticipate doing those simultaneously. And then the plan is for it to take effect July 1st. And with that, I will say any questions and thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, okay.
Roy, you named several or a couple of different components relative to the new building structure. I think part of it was flow, correct?
Correct.
And then there were some other parameters.
Sure.
Can you just put a little color commentary around what those other parameters are? The only one I know is BOD, bioelectric oxygen demand.
Biochemical oxygen demand. So yeah, the other 4 is total suspended solids, biochemical oxygen demand, total Caldol nitrogen. And then we don't currently charge anyone for total phosphorus, but with phosphorus limits potentially looming out there for discharge limits, we may have to include total phosphate at some point. So if and when that happens, everyone will get charged a rate for that. So that is what we currently charge our industries, is based on those four parameters. We actually sample them on a daily basis. So since the flows in and flows out from the various communities is difficult to get to and try to do all the chemistry and analysis, we're just going to take the TSS, BOD, TKN, and potentially total phosphorus and utilize those standards instead based off of the flow.
Well, so I think, Mike, the connection here is the fact that those are parameters that influence billing. That sort of drives our slip lining projects to make sure that we don't have infiltration of those particular elements, right?
Correct. So part of the agreement is based on total flow per month. And there's that 3-day high of water to get that Golden. So yes, that is where our slip lining, which we just approved at the last council meeting for this year, but continue to make those improvements with our infrastructure to keep clean water out, keep dirty water in, so that we're only treating what we can treat. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so we always figure for every gallon through the system, it will have so much of TSS, BOD, TKN also mixed in that gallon. So the more flow you can keep out of the system through that slip lining process, then everything else goes down also. Everything's relative.
And they did test our rates of the TSS, BOD, all that stuff, to see where we're at in comparison to that, and we're within those means. But if you recall, we talked about load versus flow. So flow is the amount of total that we're sending to it. Load is if you think of a Bud Light versus a Guinness.
Good comparison, thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Councilmember Jensen?
So Roy, so this is my ninth year on city council, and we have had a lot of discussions about this topic over the years. Obviously, it's also one of the biggest line items in our budget. So what I'm kind of sensing today is we finally have reached a point where we have predictability in our future billing, which you talked about was not there in the past. The testing, the methodology of testing is now agreed upon. Is that correct, Mike?
Correct.
Because I know at one time you had your flow meters, we had our flow meters. And we were saying, all right, what's happening here? They weren't in agreement for a while. So I guess, I mean, I know we're gonna have a presentation coming April 9th. So are all of those factors that were kind of in question in the past all resolved to everybody's satisfaction?
Yes, so we have a complete separate addendum that's attached to it that talks about location, replacing the meters, all that kind of stuff. Cedar Rapids actually gives us, City of Marion, access to their meters, so that we can pull up the data at any time and see what their meters are reading, and they can pull up ours. We are in the process of, I don't remember if it's on this council, or future council, buying new meters, and we're sharing that information as we're getting installed too, because it'll be a new software program and stuff for Cedar Rapids to see. We do have slightly different meters, so there's the hot style that actually sits down on the flow versus ours is a laser beam that shoots down. So they are slightly different. They're never gonna read exactly the same because they're not typically in the same manhole. They're very close.
So, right, I certainly understand that building the new plant and the upgrade and all of that is obviously a super major milestone. I consider finally getting to this point of a new 2080 agreement a major milestone based upon where we have been in the past. So congratulations to everybody that's been involved in that. Thank you.
Yeah, I will just add to that, that it has been great working with everyone on this project. You know, we've all come together. I don't know how many meetings we've had. But we're all looking forward to going and having an adult beverage here one of these days when that's all signed, and maybe sending a little extra flow down to the wastewater plant.
Other questions for? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would just echo Roy's sentiment. It has been a collaborative effort between you two, so. I believe the agreement that we're on currently was 7 years, so we got that time in hand.
Very good. Well, we love collaboration and improvement. And that is also much better when we do work together. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have our next presenter, which is Juliet Abdul with the Metro Economic Alliance. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Well, good evening, Mayor and governing body. Thank you for having me today to speak on behalf of the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. I have some notes to keep me on task, otherwise I go all over the place. I just wanted to share that it really truly is a treat to be able to come here and provide a quick organizational update along with some relevant information to you this evening, primarily as a reflection of our 2025 partnership with you all. I wanted to take a moment to kind of level set by talking a little bit about our organization for those of you that may have been familiar with it or have not been introduced to it in the past. The brand as it's kind of recently stands, the Economic Alliance being a regional economic development organization that was founded with the mission of driving economic growth. And we do that through workforce and population growth strategies. The vision that we have when we were founded then and now is that we are the top region, not just in Iowa, but in the entire US. So in 2011, we had organizations that focused on economic development, create this collaborative structure where we have economic development, chamber of commerce, and community development. And today we continue to advance all three of those particular pillars that we have. This slide kind of reflects a little bit about our team members. Our organization is made up of about 24 team members that operate in all of those different pillars that we spoke to. The 4 positions that I wanted to highlight primarily on this screen are newer ones that we have in our organization that have either been reimagined, that we used to outsource and kind of bought in-house, or just new team members that you may not recognize. Those 4 positions were the Director of Communications and Marketing and Creative Services, who we poached out of San Jose, California in the middle of winter. The Community Development Project Manager, who was from our region, actually had served in Jones County and parts of Iowa, which is Dusty Embrey, and then Director of Workforce Development, Data and Analytics, which is also sitting in the audience. Lisa has been poached from the Common Sense Institute, which is a research think tank. That recently has been work on brain drain and just workforce development initiatives. Mayor Nick did play an instrumental part in selecting her alongside a couple of the other mayors in the metro. This next slide is just a quick highlight that speaks to a little bit about 2025. And kind of the existing investments that the city of Marion pays in. This is an investment that's actually broken down into 2 different agreements. One that's actually not in writing right now, and talk to that a little bit at the end, and then the other is the cloud infrastructure. So the 25,000 that continues to be invested into the Economic Alliance primarily has been distributed into these 4 ways, and in addition to just the overall being a member or affiliate of our organization, and having a large investor seat at the table to a lot of those initiatives and updates that we have. Our primary professional development has really leveraged the brand of our Impact Cedar Rapids group, which has served with providing opportunities in leadership and professional development, training and networking opportunities for those kiddos that are between 25 to 45 years of age. This also looks like listing a lot of our surrounding community and our regional efforts to attract companies to the area, and including that information not only on collateral that we have, but also digital assets that we maintain. And then the other component that we have listed up here is reflective of an RFI submission, which really speaks to more of the economic development projects. Those projects that you see listed here were 3 in 2025 that we had actually submitted Marion on to be considered. Project Dirty Soda was a manufacturing company that focused on wastewater equipment. Project Kraken was a manufacturing company that also focused on medical equipment. And then the third project, Project Kit, was a global chemical manufacturing company. And then finally, I did share with you our most up-to-date advocacy piece, so thank you for humoring me to hand that out to you and scratch off of the printers. But our legislative efforts really have spoken to our combined voice at the state and federal level. And last year, particularly when we were on the Hill, we had continued to advocate for the tower terrace. Outside of that, we also provide letters of support where we can for particular fund requests at the state level, so grant dollars, specifically the brownfield or greenfield. We had a letter that we had supported your particular project, which was awarded about $585,000 for a building concept that was added in 2025. So we do that, of course, with all the goal of continuing to have a regional benefit for Marion specific, even though all of the efforts that we have is for the entire region that we serve. So this next slide touches a little bit about that second component of investments that you all invest into our organization, and that's been branded as a collaborative growth initiative. I'm not sure how much of an update you've received, so here's just a quick update of what the program is all about. Back in 2025, we had 3 mayors, Marion Mayor, City of Cedar Rapids, and then City of Hiawatha, come together to invest into this job attraction campaign or effort. And the goal was really to leverage those dollars to have new movers come into our regional community, in particular those 3 communities. And so each community had paid in what was defined as a fair share based on the population structure and the dollar amount that was set. The goal was to have 15 newcomers into the community. We ended up hitting that goal within the first 60 days, which was about 60 days sooner than what was anticipated. In total, we had over 30 movers that came to our community, and the breakdown directly into Marion was 4 movers into the city of Marion. Those positions, did come in with a six-figure salary, of course, with other family that they had. So the average household is estimated to be about 2.5. Some of them have kids, some of them have buns in the oven, and then some of them are here singly. So that's what that reflects. The goal was to have younger professionals, which the demographic did show that the predominant age group that we had was between that 40 to 49 years of age. And then the next level underneath that would have been between that 24 to about 40 years of age. And then the rest were kind of spread out. So we did nail those particular demographics. We also had a goal of hitting about 5 particular communities or states, looking at SoCal, Denver, in Arizona. We even had parts of Florida. We ended up having movers from about 10 different states, diversity-wise, and we had nearly 200 applicants that had applied for. So you may be wondering why we didn't take all of them. Well, they cost a lot of money per person, and so we could only get that particular goal that we designed, which were based off of those dollars that the cities had made into that particular program. So that was a very short overview, but I wanted to take that moment to kind of highlight that the success of Marion, in our opinion, continues to be imperative for the success of our region, and we want to continue to play that particular role in your success. The future of the economic alliance under my directive and the vision that the board of directors has empowered me to have really looks at a lot of new opportunities and for us to define kind of what our partnership looks like in the future between us and Marion and other surrounding communities. And in the past, one of the things that I quickly learned was that there wasn't anything in writing about what our partnerships really entail. And so we're really trying to focus and hone in on if we are receiving dollars, particularly from our public partners, then we want that ROI measurement that is alongside it. And so we are working on a 2026 proposal between the mayor and the city manager and our organization. And at that point, of course, we'll do some deeper dive and come at some point to imagine and present. But I'll stand for any questions that you all might have on what I just shared. If it's something I can't answer, then I'll tell you maybe back that information later.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Sarah.
How do you view regionalism?
That's a great question. I would say we've had iterations of it. So in the past, it's either looked like it's been a couple of communities that we have rallied with on particular programs. There might be a program that we only rallied with our southern portion, and that was it, so it excluded the rest. There have been word choices that were had that were for a particular stretch that didn't encompass the region. In my viewpoint, in 2 regions that we serve, there's the formal Cedar Rapids region, which is based off of our MSA, that's the federally defined, which is Glen Benton and Jones counties. And then there's the combined region, which is Cedar Rapids and United City, that's the larger, but that has about 8 counties.
So from a community standpoint, I wear a couple hats with this. I guess my question really comes into, we have to be the stewards of our community dollars, right? And they're kind. So how does the Economic Alliance work with or support the organizations we have in Marion that are very focused? Like what are we represented on boards and within your organization and Metco, the chamber, since we also are supporting them. And then my second piece of it's, and Doug and I had these conversations, and the mayor's probably over here right now. Let's head down and I'm gonna ask this question, but, as I ask it every time. Some of the most successful times that this region had is when we acted like a region and went to be as a region with prioritized projects, 1 through 20, depending on the bucket, including Iowa City. We were successful in the amphitheater monies, better courthouse, Highway 100. That has been absent for probably a decade, and I think we see the amount of money coming into this community. Our Terrace Road is a prime example of a way that it touches every community, but it hasn't, with the except there's been trips, the last trip, which was very successful. How do we get the attention of the region when we're not the largest population? Because I think sometimes it falls off the voice talking to larger numbers to make sure, like a Tower Terrace Road, that's critical, is the absolute #1 talking point of every group and the Economic Alliance leadership.
Okay, so the first question that you asked was our engagement level with organizations that are similar to us, that are located directly into Marion. That's looked like us having a role directly with Medco. So I know that one of our team members in economic development does sit on the Medco board. There's an active process for communication between those, between that entity and my director of economic development projects that does take place. In the past, my workforce division has also overlapped with some of their team members as it relates to those particular professional development programs. And then as it relates to the Chamber of Commerce, again, I have a counterpart for that internally in my organization. And so Barbara leads that particular charge and we just pretty closely with Jill. One of those programs that you'll see that is very intertwined and continues to be is our ambassadors program between both of our organizations as well. So in terms of communication, that has been consistent and we're making even more stronger efforts to have our roles defined. So we have that individual that's dedicated to those particular verticals. The second component you spoke to is actually a component that I saw when I first started. That's why I said we kind of picked and choose who we wanted to work with and who didn't. It didn't quite make sense. I'm a heck of a lot more inclusive when I say the regional components. That literature piece really speaks to that. When you see the collective voice that's listed there is actually the brands that we launched in 2026. So the collective voice for all of our region. And the thought behind it is now that we have all the stakeholder engagement from about 20 communities, Marion included, from businesses and individuals that have provided input into this particular agenda that we have 5 priorities that are listed out for the state federal level, then we would leverage that when we're going, whether it's to DC or on the Hill, knowing that each community or stakeholder also has an extensive list. Probably in addition to that, the second component of that particular question was the engagement. When you're at a DC fight or when you're at a day in the Capitol, then we can assign to you, these are the things that you speak to because you are the expert in that, you can carry that message, but we're all going behind it. And so that's how we've been working on leveraging from the public policy standpoint, the lens of this is the regional. The economic development piece is really the next one that we've kind of been working on, which is as we continue to serve and support all these communities, let's truly reflect that and how we're doing that in our messaging. And so that kind of goes back to why I'm starting to have those conversations because it has been that's been there for the last several years. Of course.
Steve. The ambassadors.
Yes.
That represent the alliance, well, excuse me, I got to turn that on. So the ambassadors that go to a lot of the events, so I've been to a couple of the biz mixes lately. And there's a noticeable change with the ambassadors. In my opinion, not a good one. They've gone from being known as the Redcoats to just somebody with a badge on and they don't stand out anymore. To me, I thought they always took a lot of pride in having those red coats. They stood out. Can you tell us why that change was made?
Yeah, I think as any organization continues to look over opportunities and areas of improvement, there's also modernization and innovation that needs to come within that. And a lot of the components of the ambassadors are actually being touched and inspected and looked through as all of our programs that invest. And so one of the things that you'll notice moving forward in the future in some of those events, which whether it's a biz mix or a ribbon cutting, even caps that we've had for them to participate and who can show up and when they can submit applications, those are all being looked over and reviewed so that any of them want to engage can be present, can be reflected to the audience. And so I think the answer to your question is that it was a modernization. There's very few chambers, the conferences nationwide that still have red coats that are designed, and as equally as we love like them, there are also a significant number that did not like them as well. And so that was a factor that was discussed between my organization in addition to our counterpart organization when that decision was made.
So you did get the input from the ambassadors themselves as to what their preference was?
We had the input by the administrators of the program, which are the organizations that lead that. So the Chamber for Marion and the Economic Alliance, and then that was communicated out to our investors.
Personal opinion is it was not a modernization. I think it was a change, but I think it took away from the importance and the standout that group previously had. So I know you're gonna make changes, you're new. I still agree with that change.
Well, I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, on to department discussions. The first one, we have the update on the solid waste agency. Director.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. On February 5th, the City Council adopted the memorandum of understanding with Lynn County, Cedar Rapids, the Solid Waste Agency. It kind of spelled out various processes to follow with respect to the future of the landfill. And the key first step in that was the creation, the appointment of a working group to research and recommend best practices for a governing structure. So the following week, I think it was February 13th, Lynn County, per the MOU, appointed a working group. And per the recommendations, or per the MOU recommendations from that working group, needed to be finalized by February 27th, and then presented to the different entities at their next meeting. So that's what we are here to do today. So the presentation is simply to provide an update and walk through the recommendations that came out of that working group that Councilman Harper and I sat on. There's no action required of the City Council at this time. There's, just to be clear, there's no expansion being considered at this time. And with these recommendations completed, we will transition to the next steps, which we will touch base on at the conclusion of this presentation. But we certainly anticipate that the next several weeks will be pretty intense in terms of putting some meat on the bones of this. This on the screen, and this was included in the packet on February 3rd and February 5th. This is the working group that was appointed. I believe there was one change. I believe it was LD Miller. There was a mayor that was going to be appointed from Central City. Unfortunately, had some conflicts. LD Miller was on as a member of the ECI COG and representing the city of Ely. So what we'll go through is just the board structure, voting thresholds, subcommittees, and the program priorities that came out. From a high level perspective, the current board structure right now is there's 9 members, 6 for Cedar Rapids, 1 for Marion, and 2 for Lynn County. As part of the discussion and the recommendation, you can see up there recommending that the board size go up to 5. The city of Cedar Rapids, while it shows that it's going to 7, the city itself would remain at 6, with the additional seat being appointed by the city of Cedar Rapids to be an large industrial user. That was one of the things that, as we talked about, they are large users of the landfill. Certainly wanted to make sure we were creating awareness and have engagement in the process. That was one of the reasons why Mark from Quaker Oats was also on the work group, to make sure we had that perspective. Marion's seats would go from 1 to 3, Lynn County 2 to 3, with the caveat that with the 3, the discussion around the small communities and representation of the small communities was a big focus at the working group meeting. And you can see the small communities, they don't have any representation now. It would go up to 1, but one of the county seats would also be one of the supervisors that represents the rural areas of the community. The conversation and part of the research leading up to that involves some communication with folks from the smaller communities, as well as Lynn County supervisors, specifically Supervisor Maishi, who represents Marion. And the concern with the smaller communities is just the bandwidth that they have to be able to support and sit on different boards. That is the In terms of high level, the numbers, as we talked about the composition, the working group felt that it was important to make sure there's a good blending of elected officials as well as staff personnel on there. That was something that came out as part of the research that Councilman Harper and I did, and we brought to the working group to talk about making sure that there's diversity. Specifically, one of the board structures that was presented by agency staff as part of the consideration was the Metro Waste Authority based out of Des Moines. And some of the conversations with staff and elected officials with that entity, they had cautioned about having too many elected officials or having too many staff. And so we talked through that and wanted to make sure that for Cedar Rapids, Marion, and Lynn County, ensure that the governing board had at least one elected official, one staff person. The small community would be filled by an elected official or a staff person. The group felt strongly about no alternates, making sure that the folks that are appointed are the ones that are attending. Really just ensures that there is that policy level perspective along with that operational expertise. One of the caveats that was, or one of the requirements that was provided in the MOU was that the board itself, such that no single entity shall constitute a majority or a controlling voting interest. And so the group talked about the different voting thresholds and went through and identified these 5 as those significant actions that this board would have come before them that would require a supermajority vote. So establishing that threshold at 10 votes. In the materials, the final report that came out on Friday, and it was not included in the packet because it came out after the publication, but we do have copies on the table back there. We're going to include this in the in focus and obviously in the minutes. But want to be very clear here that with the revisions to the settlement agreement, that is not anything that this board, this proposed governing board, can do unilaterally. We have a little note at the bottom of the slide. It would still require the vote of the Marion City Council's settlement agreement would remain in place. That is something that we covered during the February 3rd meeting. And I'll just, for the record, just on page 6, item 5, it's at the top of the page of the MOU. This agreement does not supersede, replace, or abrogate the settlement in any manner. And this does, we'll talk a little bit about this later on as we get into kind of the next steps of the what has to happen after we get past this part. One thing that was important that we did as part of the working group was evaluated or learned about some of the, you can see on the slide, 8 different scenarios that were analyzed by the agency's engineering from HDR. In turn, to meet the intent, the spirit of the intent of the 2006 settlement agreement about looking at alternatives. This was something that I think Councilman Harper and I were not necessarily aware of as we were heading into this process. This was something that was helpful that HDR staff had presented. You can see on here the different cost estimates that were compiled and evaluated, and the different parcel size that would be needed to effectuate that. One other thing that was highlighted during these meetings with respect to these is the time that it would take to effectuate any one of these if it were to materialize. The time frame that was identified was 10 to 15 years for implementation if one of these was identified. As you can tell by the cost, the cost per ton of tipping fees, as well as the parcel size. And something else that we learned throughout this process, especially talking to our consultant or our engineering firm, is that siting of a new landfill is next to impossible. So when you look at those tipping fees, the things that were communicated is the cost was just prohibitive. That and the timing, the 10 to 15 years that it would take to implement, plus the cost to implement that. Wanted to make sure we shared this. This was an important piece of information that did come out as part of the working group work. But this does tie into the subcommittee structure. Certainly understand that continuing to evaluate waste handling technologies is something that's important for this council, as well as others within the region. One of the things that the working group talked about and ultimately recommended was the subcommittee structure. This does incorporate some of the functions that the agency has in place today, with providing some additional content and responsibility within the structure of these subcommittees, to make sure that we continue to look at public policy, look at the landfill operations, evaluate those technologies. Certainly the MOU talks about establishment of goals, strategic planning, and performance metrics. So you can see under the financial and strategic planning, there is that those task areas that were identified in the MOU as consideration points. It is important to note, and I think this is on this next slide, that with the subcommittee structures, the way the working group talked about this, and ultimately what we recommended, is that the subcommittee structure allows for more engagement from those communities. So it's not just the board itself, the 14 members, but the subcommittee structure would also include members of staff from the different entities. So one of the things that we talked about was the current MPO structure. So Mike and Kim, as well as some other staff, sit on some of the different technical committees within the MPO. So making sure that there is some support for the overall board of the staff, the technical staff, to work on and help agency staff as we continue to navigate those various critical task areas. We've got the membership numbers on there. The group did feel that it was important to make sure that each subcommittee had at least 2 board members to make sure that there was oversight and there was continuity. But then also, what was that size? Talked between 5 and 7 is what we were looking at. We landed on that 7 there, which included the 2 board members. As contemplated by the MOU, establishment of goals was an important thing. These are the goal areas that were identified as part of the working group, so that we can monitor, track the performance of the landfill. One thing that was brought up as part of the discussion, and this actually generated this came from agency staff that were part of the conversation, and that was to also recommend the position of a sustainability coordinator to help with monitoring the goals, but also that public education component. These are some examples. This is something that Councilman Harper had prepared and we shared with the working group as we were working on establishing the goal areas. The working group did feel that it was important to provide this overall framework. But as assuming we get further along in the process, and when we talk about the next steps, these would be memorialized. But then if and when a new board is seated, that board may choose to add different goals, may choose to add different subcommittees to work on various items. Along that same line, just performance metrics, just these are some of the metrics that the agency reports now. But also wanted to make sure we captured this. So the quarterly tonnage reports, hauler reports, annual airspace, the number of violations I thought was an important one that Carmen had highlighted during the meeting. Before I move on to the next steps, I wanted to see if there are any questions or if there's anything that we can go back to, we should go back to. Certainly Councilman Harper was on the working group, and I don't know if there's anything I missed. I'm sure he'd like to add some color to.
Well, Brian, I think you hit the high spots, and the critical spots. I would just emphasize, 2 or 3 items. These aren't in any miraculous order of priorities, they're just how I scribbled them on my notes here. One of the things that I think is important to highlight, our current state is that even though the settlement agreement protects Marion in terms of any large decisions that have to be made in the here and now, in terms of the day in, day out, year in, year out governance, Marion is at a super minority. And so I think that has been effectively addressed. And certainly the objective of giving additional smaller community representation or a path to have their voice be heard was significant. The other thing that I think is important, the 3 committees that Brian outlined that were recommended by the working group, given their makeup, given the fact that the jurisdictions, and I think probably the big 3 or big 4 that are part of the landfills service sector, applying the right expertise is going to drive the right discussions and help get decisions faster on critical issues. So I just think that is an advantage that we're going to realize. And the other thing that I will just say in sort of a retrospective discovery, there has been in the 2021, 2022 timeframe, some pretty good work in terms of evaluation of technical alternatives, and Brian showed a summation of that. That kind of work needs to continue. The agency's consultant HDR necessarily limited their evaluation of technologies to that which was is tried and true in the United States market. There are emergent technologies in the EU and elsewhere that may in fact be eligible for evaluation. But I think my takeaway understanding on that point was they just don't have a track record relative to our market space in the United States for serious consideration as alternatives. And as Ryan said, one of the scenarios was evaluation of the new landfill, and that was, I think, generally redlined just because of the current regulatory hurdles and siting requirements that would be necessary. I do appreciate the fact that discovery of this analysis was, I think, extremely informative to us. The goal development and subsequent definition of key performance indicators, that's got to be stuff for the new governance structure to wrestle with. I think there's more work to be done in that regard, and so the working group stopped with some higher level goal areas to be entertained, and those can be then worked going forward once the whole thing's put in place.
Mayor, if I can just add one other point to what Councilman Harper was talking about with respect to the regulatory aspect of landfills. There was some discussion regarding, the regulations across the state and that work to, that actually, prohibit greater regionalism. And it kind of locks in where you can take, what landfills you can partner with. And so we did spend some time talking about the importance of having, as part of the subcommittee, one of the subcommittees, that public policy aspect, to help, ensure that while, the operations are taking place and all the other work that the agency's doing, that there is that continued exploration of the technologies, but at the same time that there's also an effort to work on the regulatory side of things, which if there are some things that could be done, may open the door for other opportunities. It was interesting that in one of the conversations with folks from the Metro Waste Authority, looking at alternative technologies and the ability to partner, the feedback that we heard from some of those folks was that they too are struggling with it. It is difficult to do, primarily because of the regulatory aspect of it, as well as the cost to the end user on some of these that makes it prohibitive.
Questions? Go ahead.
Thanks, David. Ryan, you briefly touched upon this, but just out of curiosity, speaking to the supermajority as it relates to the governance changes, specifically, obviously, changes to the settlement. Obviously, it would take a supermajority to have a recommendation to a change, but then I would still have to come to the Marion. Do we have any example? Like, what was that conversation? Do we have any examples of what a proposed change would look like or could look like?
The conversation wasn't specifically about like an expansion or a closure. We were talking in general terms of what would be those big asks, those big actions that would come before the board that should trigger a supermajority vote. That's why the debt issuance, capital projects, those would go on to tipping fees, which would then impact our end user, our customer, our residents. It was important to note that the agency does not have any debt. So we didn't get into specific examples. It was just more high level. And just to further reinforce this, that facility changes or governance changes, the 2006 settlement agreement addresses expansion for landfill. So if there was a supermajority vote on any of those topics, it would come from the agency to the city council of Marion to consider because of that settlement agreement. So the settlement agreement is that backstop.
If I might just add to that, anything of that nature that would come to council by virtue of this membership enhancement, I think the objective of the organizational structure is to really clearly define the basis of any potential pass. And then if in fact it passes muster through the entire board and it's one or more of its subordinate subcommittees, at least we can have confidence. Well, it's gone through a form of an acid bath test here to really consider all elements of it. So, but our position remains, the settlement agreement gives us that approval position that ultimately will decide any request that comes to us.
So what is the expectation about expansion? What's the expectation? I know that it's not part of this. And we said that we consider, limited expansion? What is there an expectation?
Right now, the only expectation is what's spelled out in the MOU.
You know, go ahead.
Marion colleague, I submitted a meeting statement today, yesterday, today, earlier this morning. I want to highlight three, points that from this, government document. First of all, I understand the settlement agreement is there to, safeguard us, the MOU at the same time. But I feel that this document has a governance imbalance and having one block have 7 seats, I think that's not in favor of the whole city, which we are. And secondly, if Marion is to retain financially the decision point, I think we need a clearer affirmative consent protection as a city. And for the diversion and technology planning are important, but this document does not measure milestones. And I'll say before we move forward, I think as a city, we should be asking for more this protection and a measurable version accountability and a clear public decision roadmap. And I have a question for you, Ryan.
Sure.
For someone at home right now, just catching it, understanding what we're talking about right now, can you just point to us or to them the exact section that explains how 7 of 14 seats does not constitute a controlling voting interest?
It doesn't, because it's not a majority. Any vote would require a majority, so would require 8. The city of Cedar Rapids has 6 as an organization. They do get to appoint the large industrial, but that is not the jurisdiction itself. And they do not have 8. 8 would be the controlling, would represent a controlling majority, would constitute a majority. And then the added protection to that was the whole point of the supermajority vote on those larger issues. So in terms of the working group mandate identified in the MOU, the new governance structure shall be inclusive of the communities served by the agency and shall include specific provisions for representation on the board such that no single entity shall constitute a majority or a controlling voting interest. And so with the recommendations provided here, we feel that spirit has been met. With respect to the other questions in terms of the timing and other items, I think Councilman Udeman, that's where we kind of get into the next steps. With the MOU, it was spelled out that the working group is to provide the recommendations by February 27th and then presented. The MOU does contemplate that once that's done, the entities would then work on going through and identifying these key things along with anything else that needs to be incorporated into any of the legal documents that would be need to be effectuated to make the recommendations be part of it. And then there's a series of there's sequencing that would happen. We haven't gotten to this part yet. The first priority was getting the working group together, do the research, develop those recommendations, present them, and then we transition into begin working on this is what I refer to as putting the meat on the bones.
Okay. Other questions? Go ahead, Sarah.
So if this doesn't happen, just go back to solve, because I think anybody listening or tracking through this, and me, I like things in short clips. Surprise, if this doesn't happen, what would happen? For an example, if there's no,
Yeah.
movement in all of this, the end of the result is,
So this is a critical time now because the landfill is at a point where from a permitting standpoint, the agency has gotta get a clear sense of, are they capping it and ending the landfill altogether? Or if at least the 450-foot expansion, which would give additional time, which would then allow us to, as a region, to continue to evaluate alternative technologies. If it closes, then we as a region, would need to look at what do we do with the waste? With that, some of the preliminary research that was done by the council subcommittee that was appointed, I think last year or 2 years ago, found that the cost to handle the waste would increase pretty significantly to the end user.
If we could go to the slide that showed the analysis that was done. So, just by virtue of having participated in a couple of the agency board meetings, within the last 3 years, standing in for our representative, probably to answer your question, what happens at such a point in time, probably the fastest option is scenario number 2, which is shown, which analysis from a couple of years ago suggests that can be a tipping fee at $96 a ton. These are 2021 or 2022 dollars. And so, you know, that's probably the quickest option. Now, I'm saying that from my own perspective. I think there's a lot of other considerations to go into that. So at such a point, I think what this really says is it's important for us to continue to look at options, and also from a legislative perspective, look at opportunities to have partnerships that allow us then maybe in a more cost-effective basis, potentially entertain some of these other options. So this is why I think it's important that we create the time in order to continue pursuit of alternatives that make sense for our region and the clientele that the agency serves, but also to think more broadly about how we might interact with other agencies that have fundamentally the same problem that we do. So.
okay, then, and that helps, and I think just kind of we have to circle back on why we're all here again, because this is a really, really long process. I'll say personally, I held in, I have a little angst on the, I know we already got 2 more, but the fact we're still sitting with 3, and it does kind of make me kind of uneasy. Is there any call in this document of the restructuring of the governance that there is a review process for a potential change in that governance down the road one way or another, or is this set until a whole process like this would go?
It's not contemplated, review is not contemplated in the MOU, but that's certainly something that we can, if we transition to the next phase and start working on the 2080, those are things that we can also incorporate and have those discussions with our partners. As this council knows, as we navigate, I mean, later on, you'll have a regroup of the bike ordinance, the e-bike ordinance. These are things that we will continue to bring back. We do plan on continuing to have a standing update like we are doing with the Aquatic Center on this topic. So as things progress, we will be reporting, seeking the feedback so we can make sure that that's helping informing those conversations. If I can really quick, come back to, add on to what Councilman Harper said, point two, or number two up there. So if the landfill closes, it's gonna be transferred. Our tipping fee as a region, July 1st is $53 a ton. And you can see the analysis in $21, that tipping fee would be $96 a ton. So that is a cost that gets passed through to the end user, our customers.
Okay, so then, on that, when it comes to, I also agree with Kelvin that it would be nice to see some sort of metric or timeline in agreements that talks about not just having a diversion specialist, but what are the legislative discussions? What are we having about, I mean, I feel like this has gone on so long, and I was inside of this conversation back in the early 2000s. And I understand the impacts, but and how hard it is to site a new landfill. But it almost feels like because it's gone on so long, we're just throwing up our hands and saying, it's gonna be tough. Let's look at this. I would like to see, it would be, if there's some timelines or there's some deadlines on looking at these other technologies, or legislatively who we're talking to, or what other coalition of, it's not sexy to be a coalition of landfill communities that are looking at changes happening, but it maybe in groups, those conversations can happen better than just us. I don't know, I mean, this might not be the time, maybe that's phase two, but.
Yeah, and when we talked about this briefly on the working group side, is that coming on, the working group recommended the structure. We'd go through, we put the meat on the bones and establish the new 2080, new bylaws for the group. The bylaws and the 2080 would have the structure, the requirements of those performance, everything that's identified in this final report that came out. One of the things that is sitting here is, well, the working group talked about how it's going to be important for the new board and those subcommittees to work with the agency staff to identify and provide those, establish those and then begin working towards those. So, and I think one of the ways that we can handle that, and certainly this, I'm just talking out loud here as I stand up here before you today, but as we get into the actual legal documents of making this become a reality, we can spell out those expectations that, within so much, within a time frame, and I want to make sure that we're consulting with the partners and certainly the agency staff to understand what is realistic. We don't want to set up our partners or a region up to fail. So let's identify what is realistic and then make sure that they're reporting out to all the member entities where we're at, what those timelines are, and do exactly what like what Roy did on the wastewater, what Juliet did with the economic alliances, that we would have those regular report outs.
And then this may be a next step type of phase, but it would be really great to understand where our community, Marion, where they are in understanding costs and how much different options would then be impacting them. I mean, this is really a core service, you want water to run and public services there and place, your garbage being picked up, so, I think as a community, I think it's also important to understand where those come into play at some point, education.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, that's an excellent point, I think, we got an opportunity with the community survey. The community survey comes out every 2 years. Councilman Harper talked about a new structure brings more folks, more partners from the region to the table to create awareness, but it also allows us additional time to then better engage with our community as to what's happening. I've been in the community for 4 years. I kind of learned about it as I was entering into the organization. But beyond that, I just how much is aware. I mean, I've been in local government for 25 years, and if garbage isn't picked up, streets aren't cleaned, and the water doesn't turn on, that's normally when you hear about things. So Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Gage.
Yeah, I certainly, appreciate and respect, the apprehension and the history that was the city of Marion. And I had that initial too, when I was looking through this, because some notices on Facebook, like, oh, well, that's feel a little imbalance, but then when you look at like what this board's responsible for, and the fact that the majority is needed, I guess when we're still protected through the settlement agreement and things regarding that, will come to us as regulation, I guess. My concerns about the numbers themselves kind of slip away, and I would guess ask my colleagues if there's a specific kind of situation that they are concerned with, because when I see those numbers, as long as the settlement agreement is still a protection, stay on track of any potential overflow expansion, I feel like we're in pretty good hands. And then I guess my question, I understand kind of the current, been to solid waste agency board meetings when I was looking at as a journalist, but I guess in the future, what do those meetings really look like in this future government agency, and the day, month to month, however often they meet, kind of decisions, like what decisions are happening outside of this majority, because I'm just trying to say all that to understand my colleagues' concerns and maybe help alleviate some of that, and some of that clarification of what this board is doing outside of some of the majority decisions. Does that make sense?
Yep, budget, contracts, and impairments here, I don't want to put her on the spot, but, if they, engineers to evaluate the permitting process, it's kind of like this body does in terms of identifying and authorizing contracts. If there's regulatory, filings, audits, things like that they have to do, those are things that the board would do. Certainly don't know, at this point, just, approving job descriptions or those types of things, the kind of the running the business of the agency.
This might be not actually a question for you, Ryan, but it's always agency underneath where, the voting threshold piece at the bottom, it says urgency actions or urgency declarations are exempt. And that's your regulatory requirement, I guess, what would it constitute?
Yeah, so and Councilman Harper can jump in here if I misstate this. The conversation really centered around, our region has been decimated by natural disasters. That is one of the things that has caused this landfill to fill up faster than originally projected. And the conversation really centered around, well, if we have an emergency, we've got to act. And we have some of those same functions here for the city. Just make sure that as an agency, they can quickly respond to the need of the region. But it was really centered on natural disasters, just because of the PTSD that we've experienced.
Your Honor, if I can chime in there.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think Ryan hit kind of the textbook example there. If we were to have any form of a major storm that requires some additional equipment processing or whatever the case is, that the agency can proceed without getting a supermajority vote on whatever that matter is. I think the way to think about this is emergency actions are in response to absolutely unforeseen conditions that you need to remediate or correct that condition in order to protect the operations of the facility. And so I would expect those would be short cycle, high impact kind of items versus what ought to be entertained by the subcommittees and then routinely by the full board will be those things that are cyclical, predictable, kind of standard management, standard process that is necessary. And so, I think Ryan mentioned a couple of examples, budgeting for one, maybe refinement on a capital improvement plan, necessary facility modifications in response to regulatory findings. stuff that is more, has a more routine cadence versus something that hits you and it was unforeseen and you need to have a response to it. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there would be uninvolvement by the board, but there may be just those conditions that require a fast response. So I don't know if I characterize that very well. Give me another 5 minutes on that topic and I'll have it. Well, you go ahead, Calvin.
Right, one final question, during the milestone discussions, was deadline or timeline ever raised during the discussions?
So timeline for what?
During the when the milestone, discussion was being held for this document, was a time frame or a deadline ever raised by any?
With respect to what?
Respect to, the diversion and the technology?
The timelines that were talked about were how it takes 10 to 15 years. That they've looked at it, we got that update on what was looked at. Just due to the regulatory hurdles, the permitting, the financing, the acquisition, and just kind of all the things that go into it. From the standpoint of the conversation around like the subcommittee, that the subcommittees would be charged on a regular basis to be constantly looking at this stuff. So it wasn't really, there wasn't specific timelines beyond that. Building the structure so that it handles an ongoing, this becomes an ongoing function of the business.
Grant has something else.
Well, I think we need to differentiate about management planning. And long range strategic planning. That is a different animal than what might then be more detailed project planning once a technology direction has been selected. And I think just on the basis of even the costs that have been listed in the presentation, some of those are easier to achieve technically than others. And so those kind of take different timelines. The only way to parse that out is to really approach it from a detailed project management standpoint and evaluate on that basis. The working group could not do that level of detailed examination. That has to be left to a standing organizational structure that can pay attention to those details and provide direction in flight for project definition.
And work with the agency staff on that, which is what's contemplated as part of the MOU, is that this new board is going to work with the agency staff on implementing those recommendations that are coming out of this working group. But the MOU specifically talks about establishing the structure with these considerations. So specific timelines was not a requirement of the MOU. What is being presented addresses those points. And as Councilman Harper talks about, that the conversation was about having, once that new board is seated, if this process continues, that board is going to be working with the agency staff on establishing those things, reporting out, constantly, regularly monitoring. And it's not just the board, it's a subcommittee structure, which would be represented by the different organizations at the staff level, as well as those two representatives from the board level. So there is built-in accountability within that structure.
Go ahead.
Can you go to the slide with the 8 different options? Just to clarify, so HDR to look into these options in 21, 22.
Correct.
21 and 22.
Correct.
All 8.
All 8 of them for HDR. HDR.
That was one. It's yes.
Okay, thank you. I also feel, different subject. I also feel, that the amount of representation for Marion is low. I'd like to at least see four, for the city of Marion, to answer Gabe's question down there. I understand the settlement that would have to come back, if there's anything that has to do with the settlement, it has to come back to council. But there's also other important decisions that could be made by a supermajority, where if we only have 3 representations, we potentially could have 0 say when we are the host city. And so we have a very huge part of this game of this committee or this board, because we are the host city and everything flows through us, basically, and it affects us as a city and our residents. So I think, my opinion, I think 4 would be a better number for us. So that if there can never be something that was voted on by a supermajority that we didn't have some part of say. One of our members, we didn't have a yes say. That's why I think. So you had to ask that, so that's why I think should that over. And I understand Cedar Rapids wouldn't want to go down representation, but if they stay at 6, they're not going down representation. They can easily have one of those members that they appoint to the board be a large industrial user from Cedar Rapids. I don't necessarily know if it has to be a separate candidate or a separate piece.
I think Brian can answer, but I think that making that a separate category is just guaranteed that the bad boys will be. I think industrial users, because they're impacted by the cost, but they're also a big user of the landfill services, so it's just a guarantee. You do it the other way, there's no guarantee that it'll be represented. Any other comments? What's the next steps on this, or what's
This is just a report out. What we as staff have to do is get together with our partners and start kind of working on some of these finer details. I'll definitely be taking back and sharing the feedback that we've heard today. Like I said, we're gonna have a standing update on the council agenda for this matter. So as we progress along, this is one step in a series of multiple steps that are gonna take several weeks, probably maybe a couple of months to do. I know that there is a time sensitivity to this just due to the regulatory side of things and when the agency has to get a permit in to the DNR for if it's gonna be capped or if it's gonna be if there's consideration for extension.
I think it's clear from the conversation that there's angst on the council about the level of representation for Marion. I feel like there should be greater representation for Marion, and concern about making sure that this process is leading to accountability and definite measurables in terms of progress in the direction that we all think it should be going. But those are the big things that I picked up on. If you wanted to take things back to the committee, none of this discounts the importance of this process, the level of appreciation that at least I have, and I think the council has, for the amount of work that's gone into this, the leadership stance that is being taken by the city of Marion. It's a very responsible position from a regional standpoint, and it's recognized. You know, I don't want you to think that's discounted. But you know, certainly we expected that there would be concerns and then there would be issues that people have that want to be sure. Then in going through this process, we're gonna end up with something that is truly moving us forward from where we are and protecting Marion. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is electric vehicle infrastructure implementation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be standing in front of you tonight to talk about another economic development quality of life initiative that we have, similar, maybe on a smaller scale to the landfill, which is obviously economic development, so our electric vehicle chargers in our community. We were fortunate enough when we were working on the aquatic center that our friends from Lion Energy had donated as part of their donation and excitement for our Plaza Center, that they were donating two dual charge EV stations for us to go along with the quality of life initiative that the Plaza also presents. With that, then we worked with our parking study that we had did shortly thereafter, which identified two areas. If we were going to invest in EV chargers, where would we do that? And that would be 8th Avenue, the city's 8th Avenue parking lot, which we were able to integrate through the 12th Street Alley electric project, with lowering the electrical wires and the communications with the bell tower project. So we were fortunate enough to dual those together. And then the second location would be at our Marion library. And that we are also coordinating with the generator project that we've received through the CDBG through the state about a year ago. So with that, I really wanted to point out that this EV chargers truly are in our community one of those quality initiatives. It's a core benefit. It's a high visibility. These chargers are what we call destination chargers. So we would have, when individuals come to experience our community, that they actually can just plug in. So this is a level 2 charger that Lion Energy donated. Tonight, we really need to set a fee structure, or have conversations about a fee structure to consider for approval on Thursday night. We have done the financial analysis. We did that working with Lion Energy to see what they're seeing. People, other, whether it's in a community or whether it is a private industry that has EV chargers, along with a couple of our peer communities. Not all of them have EV chargers, so we were only able to get some data points from them, and that would be the recommendation that we are providing tonight is at 25 cents per kilowatt. Based on that information, we did work with our finance team to anticipate, and IT, to participate our revenue and our expenses. With that being said, we just looked at it on average, one car per EV charging station, and that revenue would be about $220. The expense, because of having to have that wireless connection to the charger, we would then work with Charger Health and Charger Labs, who would actually monitor and help maintain the chargers with all of the data of the software program that would need to go with it. The philosophy with this one, while the program operates at a modest monthly gap of $196, the offsets of the majority of the costs, while providing a modern amenity to attract visitors to our uptown and our library. As I mentioned, the network provider would be Charger Health. As I said, IT really was a huge partner with us in identifying that, along with having those wireless connections fastened to buildings to make sure that everything would be talking to one another. Charge Labs, as I said, would be that company that would help provide customer support 24/7. So if someone is wanting to use the EV charger and they can't get their card to work, they can call a number that will be on the EV charger so that they have that support. It would utilize a Stripe with the 5% fee. This is more efficient than the flat fee and a percentage. And again, working with finance to determine what is our best path forward. And then, of course, coordinate on-site service calls if there are repairs that need to be done, and solving that on site. So the next steps here is seeking council's approval of staff's recommendation of 25 cents per kilowatt hour. Of 4/8 Avenue site, this one, it will be active, on that April 1st, date is what we are striving for with council's approval on Thursday. And then the library, we're looking at kind of late April, early May because of the generator, combining the generator project with the installation of the chargers. And I think that's it. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Direction, or what's the direction you're looking for?
So we will have, if you're comfortable with that, then we will have on the agenda through the finance with the resolution that then sets the 25 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay, so we need to gauge council feelings on that. If anybody, don't have any objection to that, if what's being suggested? Once everybody feels differently, we have a different, go ahead.
Just a question.
Yes.
Just a question to clarify, so 25 cents on 8th Avenue, what is the library also 25 cents?
It would be,
Okay.
yes, this is just stating that the one on 8th Avenue, parking lot would be active April 1, so that fee would then initiate, and as soon as the library one is up and running, it would be the same.
So all, everything would be the same.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead, Marion.
And it seems to be in this, this 25 cent per kilowatt hour fee. The fee structure, I think, has two components. One is the cost of the energy to Alliant, or from Alliant.
Correct.
And then the next component is, I'll just call it program management, program delivery, to us. What is the kilowatt hour, cost that Alliant would be charging us as a subcomponent to that 25 cents?
Grant, I'm gonna have to go back and look at that. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know Stacy in finance put all of that together for us. Have to just double check on that one. I don't want to tell you the wrong
Okay,
number.
and what's in the back of my mind is, over time, what Alliant will charge for the energy can change. And is also dependent on rate class. And then that has to be understood because this particular fee can change over time based on what we're having to pay for the energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this too, like many of our other enterprises, we will be, because this is looked at as an enterprise. So we would need to, we would go back and look at that model, just like we do with many other enterprises.
I don't have an objection to this. I think it's just important for us to understand those components.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that.
It's good. Good point. Okay, no one else. Okay, go ahead.
So again, I'm assuming, again, asking an obvious question, and I'm assuming there will be signage there as to what the kilowatt fee will be, so that
Correct.
they're not surprised by anything.
Yes, we'll have all of the information, including the charge or lab help as well. Or yes.
It's good. It's good to see that this is finally happening. We talked about it for a number of years, many years.
Yeah, very exciting. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, let's get so on with the discussion on Portugal grant program.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So we are bringing back the hotel motel grant program policy for discussion before our applications open for the fiscal year 27 season, which is early April. So when fiscal year 26 awards were recommended last year, there was some council discussion regarding events that maybe did not quite take place inside the city of Marion, and so we wanted to bring that back. Staff have kind of reviewed, and we wanted to bring back a staff recommendation addressing this and open it up for discussion. So very, very quick review. It's been a long night so far, so this short. Per the state code, hotel motel tax dollars can be spent 50% on recreation, civic, tourism activities, and then the other 50% can be spent for any local purpose. So part of our overall hotel motel budget, there is the hotel motel grant program, which is what we're going to discuss tonight. And so these applications open in April, exclusively to nonprofit organizations, and there is a hotel motel review committee that is made up of 2 staff, 1 city council representative, and 3 residents. And so they meet after the applications are submitted. They individually score, which we'll talk about here. And then there's a recommendation that's presented to city council in June. So just a recap, as we discussed this is the fiscal year 26 awards. So I'll keep the screen. We can go back to the screen during the discussion if needed. But this is the 50,000 that was awarded for fiscal year 26. So part of the review process, there is a rubric that the committee individually scores, and then they meet to collaborate on their findings. And so as it stands right now, there are 6 categories for that rubric, from, so not the green one, but from the project type down to the uniqueness of the project. And so the criteria ranges, for example, under project type, they are given a higher scoring weight if it's a one-time capital need versus if they're applying for operating expenditures. And so from the left to the right in this table, that's where the weighted benefit is higher to the left. And so the staff recommendation is that we add a 7th category for that scoring, and this would be for project location, since there is not one currently. And so this would mean that they would, under the scoring criteria, the higher weight of scoring would be for those events and projects inside of our city limits, maybe the majority is inside the city limits, but then as it goes outside, maybe a lower weight on the ones that have outside with some economic impact versus some that are outside with no economic impact. So staff feels that, this keeps the grant program inclusive, but it still does give that certain weight to the projects that are inside of Marion. So I wanted to pause there, open up for any discussion around that, suggesting we would bring the policy back at the second meeting in March. Any questions on that recommendation?
Questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Next, we have fire department response performance reliability and progress of the 23-28 strategic plan. Chief.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Jamie and I are here this evening to provide an annual update on the fire department, standards of cover, strategic plan, and some recent developments. So we're excited to give you this update. I also want to recognize, before we dig into that, 2 outstanding student photographers from Linmar High School, Ashlyn Moores and Elise Trusty. Their dedication and strong camera skills played a key role in last year's collaborative project with the fire department. Their on-site professionalism and thoughtful approach to capturing meaningful moments have truly elevated the covers of both the 2026 Community Risk Assessment Standards of Cover and the 2025 Annual Fire Department Report. We're proud of the collaboration with our partners and grateful for the positive impact their work continues to have. This presentation is going to become familiar as it is now ingrained into the regular business processes and part of the fire department's accreditation requirements. We will be covering our progress towards department goals and objectives, as well as response gaps in service capabilities. This update, which directly involves you as our city council being the authority having jurisdiction of the fire department, is a quality practice in the fire service and a requirement within the accreditation model. Our mission is our why, and the foundation to guide our programs, policy, and effort towards continuous improvement. When we say protecting life and property, to give it some context, we're protecting over 42,784 residents, many other visitors, and over $4.85 billion in assessed property value, not including schools or other government buildings. Last fall, as a part of our strategic planning review, the department discussed the creation of a mission theme, something simple yet memorable that reflects the virtue of who the Marion Fire Department aspires to be. We gathered ideas, internally discussed, and decided that make it better best aligned with our mission and vision. When our community encounters the Marion Fire Department, our goal is that they know we are here to make it better for them. This mission theme is what guides our work. In this presentation, Jamie and I are going to cover the recommendations from our updated SOC first, then response time data, performance reliability, progress towards our strategic plan, and finally conclude with an update on the accreditation process. The new SOC now includes 3 years of response time data, effectively creating a baseline towards our efforts of improvement against our benchmarks. The SOC is updated to reflect organizational progress, from last year and provides further clarity and analysis. This includes progress from previous SOC recommendations for the reallocation of resources based on risk and modeling for station optimization to address response gaps in alignment with projected growth. Both were identified as previous immediate recommendations and to be completed in the next 18 months. As a result, you will see there is more specificity as to this updated list of recommendations to acquire land for 2 fire stations. One for the relocation of Station 3 to optimize response to vulnerable populations and future community development, as well as land for Station 4 to address response gaps in the northeast and performance reliability in the southeast portions of the city. Team Marion is working on the needed next steps and will bring more information as part of these processes to council as they are developed further. Looking further ahead in the near and far term, we continue to share and receive data from partners and intend to move forward with the remodel of Fire Station 2, adopted as part of the current CIP. Unified operations with our partners through emergency communications continues to remain a key opportunity to greater efficiency and effectiveness for performance and safety to our responders. The design and construction of relocated Station 3 and new Station 4 will aid in travel time gaps and response reliability, also positioning emergency services to more effectively serve vulnerable populations and future community development in the city. With that, I'll turn it over to Jamie to share some information on response data.
So here you go. In 2025, our total response time was 8 minutes and 19 seconds. That represents a 54-second improvement in total response time from 2023. When we compare 2025 to total response time benchmark of 6 minutes and 45 seconds, we are currently 1 minute and 34 seconds above that. While we are moving in the right direction and showing measurable progress, this illustrates the gap that still exists. The largest gap of the 3 segments of total response time is in travel time. This is the segment of time from when wheels are turning until we arrive to the scene of an emergency. The map here illustrates the percentage of time the travel time benchmark was met. Last year, the Marion Fire Department responded to the highest volume of calls over any other year. Of those responses, we met our response time target 75 to 79% of the time. This does not meet the target of 90%. However, we did see improvement over last year when that 4-minute benchmark was met 60 to 69% of the time. Travel time can be impacted by several factors, including availability and location of resources. Resource availability is measured by how much time a unit is actively engaged in a 911 call. If a unit is committed to 911 calls more than 10% of the time, it starts to become unreliable as it is no longer available to provide a quality response 90% of the time. From 2023 to 2025, we saw a significant increase in unit hour utilization. The biggest jump occurred between 2023 and 2024, which aligns with the city beginning to use automatic vehicle location to dispatch calls. In 2025, UHU did stabilize, but there's still notable risk in planning zone 2. Zone 2 is more than twice the size and covers 50 more road miles than the combined totals of zone 1 and zone 3. We created planning zone 4 to monitor response performance in that northeast corner. As shown in red on the map, planning zone 4 was only able to meet the 4-minute travel time benchmark 64.54% of the time, highlighting that this area remains a key focus for improvement. I want to take a second to give a special thank you to Rachel Murtaugh, our city GIS analyst, for her work in creating over 50 custom maps as part of our standards of cover study. Her expertise and attention to detail were instrumental in helping us visualize and analyze this data in a meaningful way. On the left, you'll see a map that includes both the city of Marion and Marion Township. This map studies our travel time capability in minutes from our fire stations. The red ovals you see here highlight the areas we are not currently capable of meeting those benchmarks. On the right, the map illustrates the density of vulnerable populations within Marion. This includes factors such as age, disability, income, and access to transportation. When we evaluate our response capability alongside community risk, historical travel times, and the city's comprehensive plan, it becomes clear that there are opportunities for improvement. Some of those improvements involve process change, while others may require future resource considerations through the budgetary process. This level of analysis ensures that our proposals are data informed and focused on delivering equitable and effective service across our entire community. At this time, I'll hand it back to Chief to discuss progress and outcomes of our strategic plan.
In the spring of 2023, the department published a 5-year community-driven strategic plan facilitated by the Center for Public Safety Excellence, which included engagements with both internal and external stakeholders. From that work, the department identified 6 strategic planning goals, each with several objectives and a combined total of 205 tasks for completion. Each of the goals were framed in alignment with the City of Marion's broader strategic planning themes of safe city, efficient and effective government, and Team Marion. The red ovals in each goal box reflect the completion percentage of critical tasks within each goal initiative. The department uses a management tool called the Strategic Plans Management Implementation Guide, or MIG, to help track progress and document outcomes. Some key outcomes of our work to date are the enhancement of firefighter health and wellness through training, equipment, and updated policy, the transition from a combination department to a career department, adoption of response time benchmarks, a new department organizational structure, annual program appraisals, bolstered recruitment and retention, completion of the EMS system study and community risk assessment standard of cover, and becoming a candidate agency towards the attainment of international accreditation. The 2026 MIG is included in the council packet should you want to see greater granularity as to the progress towards tasks, objectives, and goals. Of the 205 tasks documented in the plan, 177 or 86% of them have been completed. Our department strategic planning processes will continue to evolve to ensure alignment with the city's strategic plan as it is updated in the future.
As shown here, our accreditation journey has been a deliberate step-by-step process focused on continuous improvement. We began by strengthening our internal planning and then expanded that work through a community-driven strategic plan and supported it with detailed operational studies and assessing risk within our community. Each phase was built upon the last, aligning our goals, validating our performance with data, and ensuring we are meeting both professional standards and community expectations. We have completed and submitted all of our documents, including our self-assessment manual, in which we evaluated our performance against 250 performance indicators. We have been assigned a peer review team and are moving into the document review process to be followed by a site visit in which the peer team will validate our work. This represents years of focused effort and a strong organizational commitment to continuous improvement. At this time, we'll open it up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions? We'll start with Brandon.
I think it was the response time map. You back up to that, where the gaps were.
This one?
No, it was the one that, Rachel, this one. The one on the right. I'm sorry, left. Can you again just, indicate what those, the areas within those, ovals represents?
Yes, so this is our travel time capability from our stations, based on minutes that it would take to get to those locations. So the different shades of blue are based off 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 minutes. So the darker it gets, the higher that becomes. With the travel time benchmark of 4 minutes, and the circles are the areas in which that we cannot meet that, and then the one outside of the township is where we can't meet that 9 minute for the township.
So. And I'm looking at station 3. There's an area to the south of station 3 that we can't respond to in against our benchmark.
Correct, the 4 minute.
Okay, I'm just trying to think about our road network relative to that South Marion area and just how that influences our ability to support that from station 3, or maybe that's an aggregate of what we can support from all stations. I'm trying to understand the significance of the areas that.
Sure,
Okay.
Jamie, if I could add a little bit, Grant, so the color of the shading is representative, including of all of the stations together.
Okay.
So, there will naturally be some overlap, which is actually a good thing. In some instances where we have concentrated area of call demand, that provides some resiliency when the first 2 unit may be on a call and the secondary unit may still be able to provide response within the 4 minute response time. The red ovals that are there are concentrated or areas that have been identified by Rachel through the GIS study that we are not able to get to within the 4 minutes of travel time from the station. So that's what the red ovals are representing.
Okay, I'll have to just soak on that. Maybe I can have a different discussion with you all on that. But
Sure.
okay, I appreciate that clarification. Thanks.
Yeah.
What is Steve?
So you pointed out very clearly that the response time zones that are of concern are southwest Marion and northeast Marion. Did you make a comment when you talked about the preference of, or the priority of future station number 4 versus relocation of station number 3? Did you list station number 4 as the higher priority over relocating number 3?
I did not say that. No.
Maybe I misunderstood that.
Okay. No, the timing of this, in regards to the land acquisition within our recommendations is within the next 18 months to begin acquiring the land to secure land for those 2 stations. Within the 5-year period is when we would begin the design and hopefully, again, it's just recommendations, work towards the design and construction process. The expansion station of Fire Station 4 has a significant operating cost implication to the budgetary process. The capital implications of the relocation of Fire Station 3, we do have the resources that could just be relocated once that station is in operation. In regards to a prioritization, based on community growth and the timing, I believe both of them are a priority. Particularly securing the land, which is why they both have been identified within the next 18 months. That way we can establish and secure the land in the right location based on infrastructure and growth. As a strong investment for the future, because we don't know necessarily when operating funding may be available to effectually fund the operating function of Station 4.
I totally support the identification and the land acquisition aspect of that. But obviously from a capital, from a budgetary standpoint, we clearly identified differences between those two options. That relocating station number 3 can maybe eliminate some of that deeper red on the right side of that map. Much more quickly, much more cost effectively. The challenge, as you talked about, to do station number 4, given the current budgetary constraints, unless they change dramatically, that's gonna be a much, much bigger challenge. Not so much, obviously, putting up the building itself and the equipment, more so the staffing of it that would be required for that. So, I mean, I agree both are needed, but obviously one can be supported more quickly, more easier than the other. That'd be obviously relocating station 3, but I support the land acquisition direction you're outlining.
Go ahead, Gage.
Yeah, along the same category, meeting the time benchmarks. I understand that you guys are talking, and it seems like primarily it's a patient and resource issue, busy, not a call and the issue. But are there other pieces or areas that stick out that as a city we can kind of invest on? Is it infrastructure, is it traffic, is it general more busyness, an area of trying to navigate, other things that we could be addressing when the city council?
Yeah, great perspective, Tim. In regards to leveraging technology and infrastructure over the last couple of years, that's a lot of what we've seen an enhancement on our response times already. So utilizing that ADL technology that Jamie was speaking about earlier is essentially, we used to just use response districts, when a call would go out, the location of that call based on which district it was in, it would assign a station to respond. However, they may not have necessarily been the closest unit. Today, we're using GPS technology that's available through the CAD, that's tied to the dispatch center, which is locating the closest unit based on the road miles and the network that's in place. We also use GPS preemption that is connected to some of the traffic signals throughout the city. And we've recently met with Public Works and Tom Jordan to see opportunities in the future about that. But those are already systems that are in place to help support our emergency response. And that's why we've seen some improvements over the last couple of years, is incorporating some of those quality practices. As we move into the future through our work with TAC and working with Public Works, anytime that we're looking at the new roadway networks or opportunities, we absolutely are a part of that conversation. And so those are considerations that are underway.
Anyone else? I just want to comment on how nice it is to see the progress that this department has made. More than I've seen in my entire time on council. Seems like this department's organized, has a plan, and knows where they're going. It's very also with this level of planning, professionalism. It's just gone way beyond where it's been in the past. It's noticeable. Thank you. And next we have an update on the aquatic center project. As we said.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. There's no decisions really to be made tonight. This is just a quick reminder of the tracks that we're following. We're looking at the Willowwood assessment. We're doing two things there. Doing a pretty comprehensive assessment, looking at the potential maintenance items over time. And we're really looking at it from what's going to get the facility going for 5, 10, 15 years, to be able to give the most options for council to be able to make a decision for that life cycle for facility. We're also looking at that site, if we were to rebuild a new pool, what that conceptually would look like with some cost estimates. We did talk about track 2 with the private sector, having limited appetite to partner with an aquatic center. However, we will still look into grant and funding options for that. And then track 3 for the aquatic center, where we're really refining the existing, project design and seeing what the phasing options and, how we can redesign that to make it more of an affordable option. From a timeline update, we will be coming back monthly. We did shift this calendar. We're going to be bringing back the steering committee, and really so that we can use that committee to vet these options and provide recommendations to council for those decision points as we follow these tracks. So.
Any questions for Seth? Go ahead, Ray.
Seth, I appreciate this revised, I guess, examination pathway that everybody's undertaking. I think maybe just sort of the long-term question that is in my mind is that this would not materialize in a referendum until the fall of 27, earliest, correct?
Potentially, I think that's really gonna be, right now, we're just trying to provide as much options and data for council to be able to make a decision, so there is no plan for a referendum at this point.
No, I'm just saying under some set of circumstances, that would be the earliest.
That would be the earliest, yeah.
Right, okay. That's all I was trying to say.
Anything else for Seth? Thanks for your continued work on this. This brings us to the review of the agenda for Thursday. We'll go through the items that are marked by staff. In fact, any other questions people have? First one is on page 4. Ryan?
Yes. Yeah. So this is a continuation of the fiscal year 27 budget process and our work session and all the work that we've done up to this point. This is to set the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 27 property tax levy. And so this is a publication that goes in. It's this public hearing is required by state code. It's to allow public input on the proposed levy rate. And so there's a mailing that goes out based on the publication that we will be publishing. And this mailing to our residents tells them of the public hearing dates, the time, and the proposed rates of not just the city of Marion, but the school district and the county. And so this is a preparation of that mailing. So this is a brief presentation just to answer any questions, clarifications about that publication and the mailing. And we will have the public hearing and the discussion on March 24th. So this is to set the maximum property tax levy for fiscal 27. So once this is set, this cannot go up as we work towards the adoption of the fiscal 27 budget. As you can see on the screen, the proposal is for a reduction in the levy rate of just over 35 cents. And so a couple of highlights here. General fund levy is going down with the growth limitation and the ratcheting down effect at the state level. It is going down. There's an increase in the employee benefits levy, and there's a decrease in the debt service levy, contributing to the overall decrease of the city proposed tax levy of 35 cents. So before we look at the impact slides, again, it's worth noting that this is just the city's portion of the overall property tax bill for our residents. And that's generally about 30 to 35% of the property tax bill. So looking at this impact, the residential impact, assuming, say, that middle section there, the $300,000 assessed valuation between fiscal year 26 and 27, if it was consistent with the cities, with the rollback and the city proposed levy rate, the annual property tax of a $300,000 would have gone down by $176. And then the multi-residential and the commercial impact, taking $1 million as an example, if that was consistent between fiscal year 26 and 27, that would see a decrease of $357 on the property tax bill. Now, this has been a reassessment year, which is every 2 years done by the county. And so we wanted to show this impact with the reassessment year. So a couple of tables here. The first shows that if your taxable valuation for the taxable valuation not to change, then your assessed value would have had to go up by just over 6.5%. So that kind of shows the effect of the rollback. And so the second one is if your property taxes were to stay consistent between fiscal year 26 and 27, your assessed value would have had to grow by just over 9%. Again, showing the effect of that decrease in the rollback and the decrease in the city levy rate. So we wanted to show, this is the publication that's required by the state in preparation for that mailing to the residents. So that mailing to the residents really just kind of highlights the rate. And so I wanted to highlight that here. But the left-hand column shows the current year that we're in, fiscal year 26, and the property tax revenue for each levy and the levy rate for the city. And then the far right column would be the proposed fiscal year 27 property tax revenue with the rate highlighted in green. So you can see that's that 14.896 from last year to the 14.545 from this year. The middle column, which is labeled when you get your mailing, is labeled the effective property tax rate. Can be confusing. What it's saying there is that if the city levied the exact same property tax revenue, this would be the rate. So again, slightly confusing because that would assume that we're not growing at all. So just wanted to clarify that. So is there any questions, kind of clarifying questions? We will have a public hearing or the open discussion. I just want to make sure that with the mailing coming out, everybody's prepared. I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions.
Hey, questions you have? Go ahead.
Brian, on this last, point that you just made, that middle column. That, as you said, that introduces some confusion. Materially, for anything that we are looking at, the first column and the third column are the most meaningful for explaining fundamental change that we're proposing.
Correct.
Is that middle column, I presume that's a legislatively mandated representation?
It is with this mailing that was introduced 2 years ago, that is required by the state.
I think it's important to understand.
Yeah, and this is relative to the effective property tax rate conversation. You're correct. The middle column is the result of legislative changes and the reporting of it. I will say this just from a professional experience level, and part of why we do the zero-based budgeting and the efforts that we do to manage the city finances the way we do is we, because of the zero-based budgeting process, work in a reality that is more like the effective property tax rate anyway, because we are looking at what we need. Whereas a lot of other communities, and this is why I think this is important to understand why the legislature is going through the efforts that they are from the property tax reform standpoint. Is that many communities, when they're going through and they're doing their budgeting, they're just adding percentages onto the expenses. And so then it gets calculated differently. So it's an anecdotal comment. I think it's an important one, and one in which why the city of Marion has, been looked at by the legislature as the way to do budgeting, to go through that zero-based budgeting process, to make sure that we are showing that effective rate. So what is the true rate, that people would see? I realize that might have confused things a little bit more, but, the way we do our budgeting process, it's important, and kind of speaks to that spirit.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I think I am kind of bringing up one more question. I go back up the slide. What, so have the rollback percentages that are, we need to be working with, have those been finalized
So
by the legislature?
for fiscal year 27, yes.
Okay, they haven't.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if that was still caught up as the legislative activity at the state house. Okay, so that for 27, the 44.53% is the rollback. Okay, it stays.
So just on the screen, here's the timeline for that mailing that I was talking about, then the public hearing on the 24th. We will set the public hearing for the adoption of the budget. And that will be on April 16th.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Next is G5, Mike and Kara.
Good evening, council. So I'm here tonight to discuss, am I sure? Sorry.
There you go.
I think it, yeah.
We good? Can everyone hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm short. I'm glad you can at least see me.
I know how it feels.
I know. Just watching everyone else debating if I needed a step stool, but here we are. I'm here tonight to discuss the recommendation of a trade-in of our 4 split body garbage trucks and the purchase of 4 single hopper garbage trucks. So this past year, we have been faced with several operational constraints in regards to the utilization of the split body trucks. The major concerns being on the maintenance side. So these trucks do have a 60-40 split, 60 being on the garbage and 40 being on the recycling side. We previously projected about a 250 pack out rate on that recycling portion, and we've only been able to reach about 190, which has caused us to make several trips to the landfill. So each route has to make 2 trips to the landfill daily, which has therefore increased our fuel usage overall, the wear and tear on our tires. And also we have gone through several radiators, almost 15 in the past year, and that's spread across all 4 of our vehicles. Currently with the split body, we are not set up for the future growth that we're projecting for the city. Just operational, and again, the wear and tear on these vehicles. So I would say, pictures speak louder than words. So if you look at the picture on my left, that is actually the recycling side. So the recycling falls in on that little chute. So if you can see the little square on the bottom, that's where the recycling is supposed to fall into. So if you can imagine your Amazon box that wasn't broke down trying to fit into that left side, we are having issues with everything piling up. So it goes into that second picture. That is all recycling that has piled up because it wasn't able to fall in that little chute. On the pictures on the right, or the center right, that is the arm that comes out and is supposed to pack down that recycling and push it down the chute. But again, larger items do not fall down, so they get stuck behind the arm, and it causes more wear and tear on the arm. It also causes safety concerns because it releases a sensor to the driver. When that arm has stuff behind it, the driver does have to get out at that point on the side of the truck, on the side of the road, and open up that door and try to remove what's the items behind it, which then is a major safety concern. And a reason why we started out manual collection is focus on the safety. That far right picture is actually what's occurring in all 4 of the trucks now. We've had to weld on those chutes several times and continuously debust again, because we're not being able to fall down and chute is getting stuck. So current recommendation is to, again, trade in our current split body trucks, which therefore capitalizing on the value that's in them now. And then purchasing 4 single hopper trucks. During the budget, meeting, I did project high and low estimates, the higher one being 800,000 total for 4, and the low end being 400,000. Actually, we are now coming in with the estimate of 331,239.04 for the purchase of all 4 of our trucks and the trade-ins. So we're well under what we projected on the low end. I also, of course, want to point out that there would be no changes to the rates with the trade-in and purchase. And I also want to make sure Matt Telebine wasn't able to be here with me tonight, but highlight his team's effort in doing all this. Him and the operators actually demoed several different trucks, spent time in them, driving them on our routes. They also went to different municipalities, we went to Bettendorf, Dubuque, rode in their trucks, asked questions to their operations, and truly looked at routes. We've actually refined our routes already for the future growth. So we can handle the bigger population that we're hoping to get in the future now. So I just want to make sure I highlight the team that really put this on the stand up here to recommend it. So hopefully with your guys' recommendation on, or approval on Thursday, we would hope to be operational by July with all 4 of the single hopper trucks. So that's all I have pending. Any questions?
Questions? Okay, go ahead.
With these new trucks, are they the same company, the same brand?
It is the same company, it would be through Kilburg, where we initially did get the split body trucks, or that's why we were able to get a better trade-in value with them.
We're mentioning some of the issues in putting in radiator replacements.
So the radiator, unfortunately, was more of the year of the 2024 model. It wasn't just us, it was several municipalities that had the 2024 style, so obviously I can't guarantee that we won't have those issues with the 2026 version, but we're not seeing them in the newer styles.
Yeah, I was just curious, that same brand, I assumed that wasn't a split body versus,
Yeah.
Or doing
Chassis, yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
So Tara, what I take away in terms of the split body versus single body hoppers. The split body, just on the basis of the coverage that we're making every day, the number of stops, the number of cycle times, also the mix of materials that are having to be put into the split body. Fundamentally, the duty cycle that we're putting those through is not well suited to the split body configuration.
Correct, because we don't require, the breaking down or putting into bags to slide into those vehicles into that little chute. That's not what we require, so it's not made for this style of vehicle. Also with the compaction issue, as you saw that arm where it kind of goes down, it doesn't, with all of our stops, we're not fully able, that arm doesn't compact fully in between those stops, which causes the backup of the bigger materials behind it.
I suppose our old method where our operators were getting out and doing the loading of materials in that higher touch environment, they were able to mitigate some problems that in an automated environment we will experience.
Right, when they had they were able to manipulate you physically, some of those items were now the automatic arm, they're not able to, but again, that mitigates the safety issues. We don't want them in the trucks, hands in those little shoes or arms.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate it.
Anything else? Go ahead.
I think it's unfortunate that the city does have to spend this additional amount of money, given the fact that the other units are less than a year old. However, one thing I'm convinced of is, one, we have to move in that direction. And two, the decision-making process that we did this time in selecting the units we're moving forward with is much better, more robust, more decisive than it was the first time. So I'm comfortable with the direction we're moving in. I think it's just unfortunate we've got to be spending the additional money in that short amount of time. So I'm glad to hear these. I wasn't sure which units you were going to go with. So you're very confident that the radiator problems are behind us and will no longer be effective.
I can't guarantee if I was a betting lady, I would say we're okay.
You're betting what?
Do what?
You are betting.
Yeah, if I was.
Were,
Can't guarantee.
all right. Glad to hear it, thank you.
So, Tara, just one last, point of clarification. So the truck chassis and the single or double hopper, bodies, those are separate manufacturers from the engines, correct? The engine it isn't a Freightliner engine, it's a Cummins or.
Oh, correct, yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I was just wanting to tease out here for our common understanding is that. If the problems we've had with radiators and any other associated issues with the engines that have been a maintenance headache to us. That's really from the engine manufacturer, which they've had a production run, common problem.
Yes, it was more of the production. That's why I said it was more isolated in that 2024 version of a truck.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. James Strike, you're next. D1 on page 5.
All right, we are coming back to council meeting for some updates reference the e-bike proposal that we put through. There's a couple questions that were asked at the council meeting. One was accident and injury data. We don't have any reports of any injuries from e-bikes within the past couple of years. We do have some updates on the state legislation that is currently in the works and some conversation about speed limits. So this is the one that's probably the most controversial at the state level. Is this proposal to limit all bicycles and e-bikes on all roads throughout the state to 25 miles an hour. There has been a lot of pushback on this from the biking community. So as of right now, it's still under review from the House Public Safety Subcommittee. But I could see this probably not going through just because of it would probably outlaw rag riot. Now, like the state would want to do that. This other one is just a little bit of a language change with the wattage of the e-bikes. Before it was saying less than 750 watts, and now they're changing it to say not more than 750 watts. So that was the other one that's currently on the floor right now for consideration. So the ordinance summary that we proposed was really doing a speed limit for the sidewalks of 10 miles an hour and a max speed on paths and trails to 15 miles an hour. And then there was some question on the shared use path. So any off-road or unpaved trail designated for public recreation 6 feet or wider would be subject to that 15-mile-an-hour rule instead of the 10-mile-an-hour rule. So if the sidewalk was extra wide, that would be a trail instead of a sidewalk. No, I can't go over that. Sorry, I broke it. The other question that came up, reference about changing our ordinance. I know Mike and Seth had met with, you fix that, thanks. Had met with some biking communities on, was that yesterday?
Yeah, we met Monday with both Lynn County Trails Association and the Lynn Area Mountain Bike Association, and really just discussing to them about the ordinance, and a lot of their what we talked about was about the behavior in the trail etiquette side of things. Their original concern was just a 15 mile per hour being too slow. We discussed about what Lynn County and the Cedar Rapids their limits for the class 1, class 2, having at 20 miles per hour is being the max. And so that's really the direction they're going. They did talk about helping us with the education and communication following the ordinance. So they're really collaborative and communicating with us.
So what we would be looking for tonight on that is that if council would be so inclined, we would need direction to make that modification now because that would be a substantial change to the ordinance. And we would need to bring it back as a first reading of the new ordinance rather than amending this one.
So the change, just so that we're clear, the change would be,
It would be if council was inclined to change it from the 15 miles per hour on the trails to the 20, which was discussed.
just to be clear, it could be the one I assumed. And was that all the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any particular thoughts on that, or? Is everyone generally supportive, anyone not supportive, you're not supportive?
I'm supportive. I think keep it at 15. I get being regional, but I don't think other people's decision. I looked a little research on this and I, granted, it was fleeting and it was, and the Rails to Trails organization, I talked up with you about it. And they said the average person rides at 13 miles an hour. So 15 is not, is the average person 13. And I understand that the Tour de France, they're going up hills and they're going through towns, but the average Tour de France rider rides at between 25 and 26 miles. According to their information. So I don't think that our trails are meant to be at a Tour de France roadway. If you want to ride that fast, then go on the roadways, and ride as fast as your little heart desires. But you've got a mixed use trail system where you have walkers and you have people wearing headphones. And I know this is an etiquette thing, but I swear, going outside, it's a nice evening and you cannot walk on the trail without being yelled at consistently by everybody person going by you. And it's like they want to own the trails and you want to own the roads. And I just think that harmoniously living together on these trails, people flying by is not the place to be doing it. If you want to do it, get on the roads and go as fast as you want, but trails are not structured to be a raceway. They're structured to be an entertainment place. I mean, there'd be no way to, I'll say leisurely ride, but it shouldn't be speeding through it. So, it's part of the reason I like to walk the gravel trails, is at least the bikes aren't going quite as fast as they are when you get on me. So, you all do what you're gonna do, but I have a hard advocate on 15. Get that, so.
Yeah, I'm exactly the opposite of Sarah. The only way I will vote for this if it changes to 20 miles per hour. I sent the chief an email after our last meeting with the comments that, one, I believe in consistency. Two, if you're on the trails, you don't know when you're going from Lynn County to Marion to Cedar Rapids. People do not have speedometers on their bikes, the majority of them do not. So again, to me, I will tell you 90% of the solution is the education and the etiquette. It's not the 15 versus the 20. So unless we're all the same, I will not support it.
Everyone else, go ahead. Page.
On the same page I think another piece of the etiquette and education has been more than just or by some of this, I think there's a lot of etiquette and education done for folks who are walking the trail, but also to share space for bicycles. As someone bikes on the trails, there's a lot of situations where walkers take up, group of people take up both sides and or the whole entirety of the trail as a bicyclist, what are you supposed to do other than, on your left? But then you got people going which way, but, I'm the same, if it stays at 15 now, I'm taking it out, just like last time. So I'm in favor of 20.
And, on addition to that, we were in Sarasota for a wedding a couple weeks ago, and it just so happened that they were dropping their speed limit for their bikes from 20 to 15 weekend we were there because of the number of accidents and sharing the trails. We were on a causeway piece going over it, and actually we're there with we came over, there was an officer there that had 3 kids pulled over that had an actual third bike they were riding on the trail. This officer was having a gentle conversation with them, but the notifications were all over about how one was not working. Them on the rail systems through there, and they had just enacted that it was going to this month to 15. So I get that, but if you're on a bike, I would just challenge bike riders, if you are driving, if you're riding your bike on the road, do you want every car that goes by you honking their horn at you? Because that's basically what happens when people are walking and the bikes going by them are constantly yelling at your left. And so, or honking their horn, or I've got dirty looks. We were just walking down the trail the other night, by Menards, and there were two bikers coming on recumbent bikes. And they absolutely were not gonna move. They would not move over for us walking. We had to go on the grass, and they wouldn't even look at us, flying past. And I'm thinking, here we go again. And so, I don't know what the speed was, but I know there's a lot of etiquette. But I'm hard on 15, so. I'll close my mouth now.
Anyone else? Cindy, go ahead.
So I think I'm less sensitive to the speed. I'm very sensitive to the behavior modification side of all of this. I would just know from my colleagues, next week on Wednesday, we have an MPO executive committee. And I think I want to just introduce this again in that venue for discussion. In either case, 15 or 20, I think we have to somehow monitor the performance, understand if it's at all possible. I noticed that we didn't have any injury data that was informative. We can always change whether we go with 15 and everybody's just perfect. So we move it to 20, or if we had set it at 20. And because of problems that evidence to us, we changed that down to 15. I don't view this as a static number. I guess, Your Honor, I'm thinking that unless there is a fundamental change at the regional level through the MPO and the other associations, if there is, I guess, a proclivity to set 20, I can get comfortable with that. We need to monitor it. I think everybody ought to be doing the same thing in terms of really behavior modification. And because we may have some occurrences where 15 is the right number for everybody. So that was a long way to get to say, I can get comfortable with 20.
I think the majority of people would be okay with the 20.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone for that good discussion. Next item, on E1 on page 6, I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Anna.
Hello, Nicole.
Good evening, council. So E1 here, we've got applicants that are requesting the vacation of a 15-foot access easement along the southern portion there of 560 31st Street. They do own the vacant ground as well on that grass area on the corner. The easement is not on that property though, but they do own both of that. So again, the applicants are requesting to vacate that 15-foot access easement. They're highlighted in red. The easement was established back in 2021 when the Barnes First Edition final plat went through council. So part of that, and I'll included this 560 parcel, the one to the west, and then the one yet to the west even. So there was 4 parcels that were included in that original Barnes First Edition. At that time, they were all owned by that same property owner. Shortly after that final plat though, the property to the west of the highlighted parcel 560 was sold to a different property owner, and then a chain had been strung across that 15-foot access easement to help prevent cut-through traffic there. Now that access easement, the original intent, it was a request by city staff that be put on that final plat, and it was for emergency management access with that. Again, that chain had been put in there shortly after the property to the west sold in 2021. Talking with Deputy Hanson at the fire station, they didn't see any continued need for that access easement. For the applicant's letter, which was included in the packet. Part of their reasoning for requesting the vacation is that after they purchased the highlighted property this last November, that chain had been broken and a lot of cut through traffic has been starting to use that access easement. Staff looked at other commercial areas in town that have that ingress and egress easement through them. Most of those easements are 25 to 30 feet wide. When we are anticipating, commercial traffic to be utilizing those areas. There is a 15-foot utility easement within that shaded red area as well that would be maintained. We're not looking at vacating that easement. That 15-foot easement for utility would remain in place. We do have public infrastructure within that area. It also provides access to maintain the water tower there. So staff is recommending approval of vacating that 15-foot access easement. Again, the original intended use for emergency service access to the west there is not seen as being required yet by the fire station. There is access to all those properties via 5th Avenue to 30th Street. They're on the back side, and we would maintain that 15-foot utility easement. So we just wanted to bring this forward. This is more of a unique request that we don't get often.
Any questions on this item? All right, move on to the next one.
Okay. So we do have a public hearing on Thursday night for this item. We just wanted to touch base though with you ahead of that public hearing, just to make sure that if there are any questions, we're having all that information and responses available during that discussion portion. So I'm going to do a high level kind of overview of what this request is today, going into more detail on Thursday with that public hearing. So the request by the applicants is to zone the highlighted property there. It's just north of Highway 100 and west of South 31st Street. It was recently annexed in December. So part of kind of that last step with any annexation is to zone the property. So that's kind of the point where we are in that process now. With this request, there is no project that's been brought forward for staff review beyond the aquatic center that staff internally has been working with Parks as we've walked through that process. Again, this is just kind of that final step with any annexation. But getting into the request itself, so they are requesting MR2, which is a high density multifamily residential district on the north end there, and then moving to BC community business in that kind of pink shaded area on that right map. So with this, the requested zoning districts do align with our adopted Marion 2045 comprehensive plan and the future land use map within that document. On the left-hand side is that future land use map. So we've got high intensity on the north side there. We've got the arrow showing that that does align with that MR2 zoning district. And then moving further down, we've got mixed use for a land use designation, and then finally along the highway commercial. So looking at this, we have had a lot of comments from the public ahead of our planning and zoning commission meeting, which was back on February 10th. A lot of those comments, which were provided in the packet for you, but a lot of comments we've heard isn't that where the aquatic center is going. And as Seth shared with tonight, reminded us all that, yes, we've got direction from council to continue looking at that site for the aquatic center, but there's other evaluation that's going on the backside. If and when that project does move forward with the site on the northern side here where the MR2 is kind of designated, we would come back before council. We would ask for that future land use map amendment to civic, or I think we have a parks designation actually, and then we'd zone it appropriately at that time. So this request is purely based off of our adopted comprehensive plan. Let's see here. Again, just kind of keeping it a little more on the higher level tonight. So that future land use, so the high intensity does align with the MR2 request by the applicants. High intensity is a residentially focused land use designation where the density of the residential is 14 dwelling units an acre. But with our MR2 zoning district, they're allowed for that zoning district definition, you have 20 dwelling units an acre. So it is the most compatible zoning district we have for that land use. On the screen, I've got those bulk regulations that you can look at, but also a list of what some of those permitted uses are within that MR2 district. It could include apartments, which is one that everyone kind of envisions when you say multifamily residential. However, it can include townhomes, it could be an assisted living facility, nursing facility. So there are other things besides just apartments that are permitted within that high density residential, multifamily residential zoning district. Going to the BC zoning request. So that does cover that mixed use land use designation and the commercial designation. That commercial designation starts kind of if Grand Avenue were to continue east and west there, that commercial land use is kind of along Grand south to the highway. So when future projects do come in for this property, we first look at the zoning district. Is the use they're wanting to do permitted within that list? Again, we've got a partial list up on the screen of what that could include: banks, daycares, restaurants, that sort of thing. But we also take a look at our comprehensive plan. Again, there are 2 land use designations that would be a part of this zoning district area. So depending on where that future project were to be placed on site, we look at those building forms, that site layout, that comprehensive plan kind of talks to. So things along the highway are gonna have a larger building form than those that are gonna be up more towards the residential neighborhood. So we do look at building form, and making sure those future projects are compatible as they come through this process. So again, this is that kind of final step with the annexation process of this property. And we will be here to go a little more in detail on Thursday with that public hearing portion. But yeah, I wanted to get any questions that you might have so we can have that information provided for you so you can make a well-informed decision.
Go ahead, Gage.
Yeah, just a quick question. I saw that planning zoning was one. I was just wondering what the one person concerned about one.
Yeah, there was a lot of conversation between the commission members for this item. A lot of it revolved around that northern portion for the MR2 area in the aquatic center. And thinking that, well, that area has been slated for the aquatic center. It was reminding them that we are basing this off of what our adopted comprehensive plan shows. And that if that aquatic center does move forward in that location, this information would be updated.
It's not precluded, right? I mean, it doesn't preclude it. This doesn't preclude
No,
the opportunity to use that for an aquatic center if that should happen to proceed.
correct. Yep, we would come back here. We would go back through this process. We'd update all the maps accordingly.
The one descending road, you can see that's their concern.
They didn't fully state what their concern is, but that was a general comment from the commission. A lot of them did vote to approve it because it did align with the comprehensive plan.
Case, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Go ahead, Steve.
So Nicole, on the left side, going back to the other map. please.
Yep.
Thank you. So on the left side, the future land use map talked about the middle section being mixed use.
Correct.
Define that for me.
So it does offer kind of that commercial service type needs, but also residential components to it. It is a very flexible land use designation where a lot of different zoning districts could fall into that. The comprehensive plan in that land use map is the broader brush. Zoning gets more specific. So that is the land use where In this case, they're asking for community business, but it could be, in other locations of town. It could be more of a, residential focused zoning district as well. So it does offer more flexibility.
I anticipated that's what it was, so this is a 100, if I got it right, about a 107 acre site,
Correct.
okay? So we've got, I don't know, in the MR2 is probably what, maybe,
13 acres,
that's 13 acres?
roughly,
Okay,
so 95-ish.
okay, so we're talking about, and I fully understand on the left side of that, the bottom section being commercial. As we've talked about, because you got Grand Avenue, that was extended over Grand Avenue, will be on the north side of that. You've got no residential on the west side of that section. But the aspect of this, as I look at it, to have all of this as BC, I've got some concern. Because you've got 100% residential on the west side of all of this. You've got apartment buildings on the east side. So I'm not seeing any transitional aspect of this at all. If it goes to BC, since that does not allow for any residential. It's all, I looked at the statement you had there, it's upper level dwellings. So it does not even allow for apartment buildings, is that correct? Or condos or anything of that nature?
Yeah, upper level dwelling units is probably one of the main
Yeah.
forms of residential. If you recall, as we were going through, our comp plan and our design standard stuff. Especially like our conversation on Tower Terrace where, these commercial areas could allow for those apartment buildings if they sit behind other commercial buildings. So if they're standalone, they'd have to sit more interior to the property versus along the edge.
So there is potential for apartment buildings that. As a, like, you say, at least. As a buffer between.
There would be potential.
So that aspect, does concern me, that all of a sudden you're talking about going from what's gonna be a much smaller section of commercial. To the entire 90 acres being all BC, so. Without any defined transition, I do have some concern about that, I don't know what the plans are. I know we got opportunities in the future to look at it, but from the zoning standpoint, once you go to that zoning, then I think you're restricting yourself. In the future for any transition on either side.
That it? Anyone else? Oh, sorry, man, get out of you, sorry, that's okay. Nicole, I think there's, if you back up to the diagram that shows MR2. Yeah, excellent. This is more of a comment. It seems to me, I remember as part of the version 1 aquatic center planning that the southern boundary of that property area extended to the east from Alexa Lane. So just in essence, about two residential lots to the south. I guess, had any of that been factored into sizing of the MR2, or maybe you're gonna tell us, we don't care about that, right?
So the MR2, kind of the area that's been identified aligns with where kind of that boundary for that high intensity in the future land use map is showing. So if an aquatic center goes in, we would update that small portion of the mixed use in the high density to a parks land use designation. And then the zoning, would fall into place as well. And it would align appropriately at whatever area that would take up.
Let me rephrase maybe the question that's in my mind. The east-west bounce, the southern east-west boundary of the MR2.
Is a
The
little,
earlier plan for aquatic center planning, wasn't that aligned with where Alexa Lane
correct,
is?
yes, yep. So the aquatic center roughly around the 21 acres. If you follow that road alignment across, and this is hitting more around that 13 acres.
So does this current configuration cause us any concerns potentially at a future date? In terms of that alignment of the southern boundary with Alexa?
I would say no, at that time, we would make sure that those designations are being updated as well. The appropriate designations. So that line can shift, as long as a project doesn't go in that area prior to anything happening. That would be the only thing that would limit us.
I just wanted, I guess, to point out what I recollected about our past planning versus this.
Go ahead, Paul.
The purchase contract for that aquatic center, is that still in place, just on hold, basically, so no one can purchase that land across from Lexus to develop it, because we still have commercial refusal or whatnot.
That's
Pretty, okay, thank you.
So
That would alleviate
we have an
that
option.
issue.
We do, yeah.
Anyone else?
You have anything else to add? Nicole? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mayor, I think that's the last item for discussion unless council has any other items they want to talk
If you
about.
want to give everyone a chance to ask questions on the, we're gonna hear the agenda that wasn't fine, so it's perfect.
Yeah, we do have a thought on closed session, yeah, so.
Okay. Any questions on any remaining item on the agenda that was not on by staff for discussion? Have any questions or? Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just, we had, scheduled a closed session, regarding litigation. We do not need that tonight, so staff recommends not going into closed session.
Okay. So we need to,
We're done.
okay. Very good. We don't need to act on that or anything.
Nope.
Okay.
Then that brings us to the conclusion of the work session. Thank you, everyone, for all your work. And we'll see you on Thursday.
No.